Hey everyone, Zachariasen here, and this video is a follow-up to my previous video, which was about this, the simplified anatomy model that I made for reference. And one of the questions I kept getting was, can I do a female version of this? And actually, this was supposed to be fairly androgynous, and clearly it reads only as a male, so I don't know, I guess it goes down to the fact that when I draw males, I tend to use really, extreme proportions. I make them often. When I make them, they're very buff. So to me, I was like, well, this one is pretty tame, I guess. This looks pretty androgynous, but no, I guess it's not. I guess it's not too androgynous. But the thing is, when it comes to males and females, in terms of fat deposits and even bone, there's variation, like pretty big variation. But in terms of muscles, there really isn't. So the one difference is probably in terms of like the form is the breast. So that's something that I will cover, but I also have a how to draw breast tutorial that goes much more in depth into that. But the breasts are kind of added on. So what I mean by that is when you have a figure, and here I just made another one called Variation, and I'll make this available to download as well. And I've just got some different variations on this model. And you see with the breasts, you still have the same muscles. Like, see, you still have the pec muscle and the ribs and stuff. And these aren't exactly describing muscles. They're sort of just sections that I think of when I draw. So this isn't really like a guide to how you should draw. I think of it more like a visual aid if you're already learning anatomy, or if you just want to draw the figure and you need to know what are the basic components that will help you draw the figure from imagination, or if you're doing figure drawing, will help you so you can understand what the figure is doing, like what part is what. So for instance, if I'm drawing a figure, they might have a part where, their arm is up and then they have a bump, and you want to know, like, what's this bump and how do I draw this? What part overlaps? Well, by knowing this stuff, you can see, well, that's the tricep muscle and this part overlaps. So what does it mean practically? It means when I'm drawing this shoulder, I can draw this little indication to show this comes in front of this form, right? So that's it. It's not like you actually go ahead and draw every individual muscle like a person is flayed, but you do need to know what's going on underneath to make it easier. So that's how I do it. And then, so when it comes to breasts, they're added on, really. Like, I could give this big guy breasts, and the way I would do it is, the way I think of it is like a comma shape. So like, I don't know, like a comma is like this shape, right? So you take this and you spin it around. So you've got this part, and then it comes like bigger, and then it goes like this. And this part right here, this tail of the comma, that tucks in underneath the pectoralis muscle. So you have this big pec, and this tucks in underneath. So let me just draw it on. No, that's fine to draw it here. Okay, so it tucks in underneath, and then it comes up, and you get that comma shape. So now this is maybe a female bodybuilder. And you have this shape to the breasts. What's important, I feel, is to know what overlaps what. So because it tucks under, you get things like this. So let's say this person has breasts. So you have this indication, which is the pec. So that's this part. And then you have the breast coming under, and it goes around, and then it fills in this form, right? So you get a little indent here often. And so that's kind of how I go about thinking about these things, is the breasts are added on top of the same form. Now, what happens when you get a larger figure? Well, again, because this isn't actually how the muscles work, because they don't expand like this, of course. You still have the same musculature underneath, but what happens is you have fat deposits. But I still think of these just as sections. Like you have this section for the obliques, and then you have this section. But I mean, I guess when I draw, I don't always, like I don't draw like this, right? When I draw, first thing I do if I'm drawing a figure is usually I get the gesture, and I get the head and the torso in. I get the collarbone alignment. I add, where the pelvis goes, and then the limbs, and like if the hand is doing something, I put where the hand goes, and I connect the arm. What this is for is how I think. So I think it's better to actually use this as just a reference when you're already drawing, when you're confused about something. So like you're looking at this and it's like, I know, or you're looking at your anatomy books and there's a bunch of muscles and it's like, well, what goes on here, with this arm? There's usually a bunch more information. And then you look at this and it's like, oh, okay, so I need to pay attention to this portion. Or like with the butt, and like, how does this connect, sort of, like when you turn the figure. So that's what I want this to be used for. And when I draw larger women, I tend to just do this, like I'll get the head, and I just envelop the body in a shape. And also because I like stylizing things, I make the legs shorter, something like this, and the arms shorter, like that. And that's sort of my my model, I guess. But the reality is it's not gonna look that way, but I do everything very stylized. So that's how I actually tend to draw the figure. But this part is just to show, like, the sections are the same no matter what, gender or age you're using. So for instance, here's a guy and he's not super buff, and still the same sections. And here's like an older couple, and so the muscles are much smaller, but the sections are the same, right? So that's why learning these sections, I feel, is important. And when you get it down, these rhythms, what's cool is, first of all, you can find your own rhythms. You don't need to use the ones I've created. It's just an idea. Like, take this however you want. You'll probably create your own figure. And why don't I? Because I used to talk about the 8 head sections, the 8 head proportion. Like, you start with a marker for the top and the bottom, divide it in 2, and then divide it into again, and then into 4. So you have 8 sections. And then you can create your proportions. I don't think this is wrong. And it's fine to get the basic body proportion of the human figure. The thing is, for me, I don't use that proportion anymore. And I like to play around a lot more. And if I just think in terms of 8 heads tall like this, it gets a bit confusing when I want to bend the figure. I mean, sure, if they're just doing this, it's fine, but it can be a bit confusing if they're, twisting, and, you've got the torso coming out, maybe it goes around, and the legs going back here, doing, I don't know what, but, if you get complicated poses, it gets a lot more tricky when you're using this. And what this is for, really, is to get you just used to a proportion. So when you're capable of drawing one proportion, so the figure in just even a stick man, a stick man in a certain proportion. Then when you want to draw a figure in a different proportion, you have this to work from. You can start here and then distort it. So it's like, well, this guy has a very long torso. So, okay, you can make a very long torso, and then small pelvis and tiny legs and long arms. So that's fine. But I find it's really helpful for me to use the sections, because what they do is they create this rhythm, first of all, where it doesn't matter what the pose is, everything has to follow a rhythm. So let's say, you got your figure and they're doing, I don't know what they're doing. Maybe they're bending in some difficult way. So the arms are going down here. And this is more or less how I draw, with very loose at first. I'm not afraid of being scribbly or messy. I've been criticized for not being clean, but when I do draw more clean, it's not like I can't, but I find everything gets stiff. And so my compromise was, what's the point of drawing it, this way if I'm going to lose something that's important to me, which is energy and vibrancy and just having fun drawing. So you get this. Well, you can go to your sections and see, well, all right, so what's going on here? Well, you've got to have this rib area, and you have that, and you have your pecs, and then where do they go? What happens here? What do they connect into? At what point do they connect? So you see, like, the bottom of the pec lines up with the bottom of the deltoid. That's important to know. The elbows sort of match up to where the navel is, roughly. So that's important to know. This thing here, this is the greater trochanter, and it's also the widest part. Here I kind of screwed up, but anyway, it's the widest part usually, unless you have fat. Like if you have a leg, right? You have your pelvis, and you have this going down. This is the knee. This is like the widest part, and it's a bone. But if you have a lot of fat, the fat can make it seem like this. Well, it'll just make it so this is the widest part. But if you have a very skinny person, this is going to be the widest part here. And that is this circle, and that lines up with the bottom of the crotch. So it just helps to have these relationships. And then, like with the arm here, what you can do is just create this flow. So you have this shape, and you have this deltoid shape, and it connects into this. You have the elbow, tricep, bicep, this part of the forearm, and it does change depending on, like in this view, but if you're doing it bent or something, or in a different view, all these elements would change, but they wouldn't change their relationship to each other. For instance, the deltoid is always going to be dividing the bicep and the tricep in half, because, see, it divides these two sections. This part, as it turns, it looks different, but it's still doing the same thing. It's not moving around. So, I don't know. Pretty much that's what I wanted to talk about more than anything, is that the sections work across the board with any proportion. You can have a taller figure, smaller figure, it doesn't matter, it's the same. So, yeah, that's that. I hope this helped, and thanks for watching.